Manipulation rarely looks like manipulation. It looks like concern, logic, humor, or helpfulness, until you trace where it is leading you. Psychological manipulation is the use of indirect or deceptive strategies to influence someone's behavior or beliefs, bypassing rational agency and going straight for emotions, insecurities, and cognitive shortcuts instead. It rarely announces itself. A manipulator using guilt will sound concerned. One using pressure will sound logical. One exploiting insecurity will sound like the only person who truly understands you. The tactic works precisely because it borrows the shape of something legitimate: advice, care, humor, persuasion, while quietly redirecting the outcome toward what the manipulator wants, rather than what you would freely choose. This is why the common assumption that manipulators are obviously cold or aggressive misses the vast majority of real cases. Most manipulation is warm on the surface. A request wrapped in flattery still moves you somewhere you didn't decide to go. A joke that stings just enough to keep you quiet still functions as control. What separates manipulation from ordinary influence is not tone, it's transparency. Healthy persuasion states its interest and lets you weigh it, while manipulation hides the interest and engineers the weighing itself. Once you strip away the disguise, the underlying move is almost always the same. Someone is trying to get an outcome without asking for it directly, because asking directly might get a no. Manipulators, whether consciously or through learned instinct, exploit a small set of well-documented cognitive biases that psychologist Robert Cialdini catalogued as core levers of influence. Reciprocity means we feel an almost automatic obligation to return a favor, so an unsolicited gift or gesture creates quiet pressure to comply later. Social proof means we trust a choice more once we believe others already approve of it, so a manipulator will claim everyone agrees or everyone else already said yes. The consistency principle means that once we've stated a position or made a small commitment, we feel compelled to act in line with it even when circumstances change, which is why manipulators love securing a small yes early and building on it later. None of these biases require intelligence or awareness to work. They fire below conscious deliberation, in the same fast, automatic processing the brain uses for split-second decisions. By the time a person consciously evaluates a request, the emotional groundwork has often already been laid, and the decision feels less like a choice and more like a foregone conclusion. This is precisely why manipulation can work on intelligent, self-aware people. The vulnerability isn't stupidity. It's the architecture of ordinary human cognition, and manipulators have simply learned which levers to pull. Manipulative behavior is rarely a straightforward expression of power. It's more often rooted in a deep sense of powerlessness or distrust, where the person manipulating has learned, usually early and usually the hard way, that direct requests get rejected, dismissed, or punished. If asking plainly for what you need has repeatedly failed or backfired, the nervous system starts searching for alternatives that work more reliably, and indirect control becomes the default strategy for getting needs met without risking outright refusal. Seen this way, manipulation functions as a workaround rather than a character trait. It typically develops in families or relationships where honesty was met with punishment, where vulnerability was exploited rather than protected, or where the only way to get attention or resources was to manage other people's perceptions rather than state a need outright. Over time, the workaround becomes automatic. The person stops experiencing it as a choice between honesty and manipulation and starts experiencing manipulation as simply how things get done. This doesn't make the behavior harmless to the people on the receiving end, and it doesn't remove accountability. But it does explain why manipulators are so often people who appear controlled and composed on the surface, while operating from a place that is, underneath, defensive and afraid of being told no. In practice, manipulation shows up as a small, repeatable toolkit rather than a single dramatic act. Guilt-tripping frames a normal boundary as a betrayal, making you responsible for someone else's disappointment even when you've done nothing wrong. Playing victim reverses accountability mid-conflict, turning the person who raised a legitimate concern into the one who now has to apologize. Intermittent praise creates dependency by pairing occasional warmth with more frequent criticism, so the target starts working harder for scraps of approval that arrive unpredictably. Moving goalposts means the requirement for approval or resolution keeps shifting just as it's about to be met. which keeps the target permanently one step behind. Love withdrawal punishes independence directly, with sudden coldness or distance the moment the target asserts a need or opinion that doesn't serve the manipulator. These tactics are often used in combination and layered across a single conversation, which makes them harder to isolate and name in the moment. Individually, each tactic can look like an isolated incident, a bad day, an overreaction on someone's part. It's only when you track the pattern across weeks and months that the design becomes visible. Consistent, repeatable pressure aimed at the same outcome, dressed differently each time depending on what the moment calls for. Recognizing any single instance rarely feels like enough evidence to act on, which is exactly the gap these techniques are built to exploit. Being on the receiving end of chronic manipulation does lasting damage that rarely gets named accurately while it's happening. The most immediate cost is erosion of self-trust. When your perceptions are consistently challenged, redirected, or dismissed, you start doubting your own read of events even in situations where your judgment was accurate all along. This produces a specific kind of confusion, not about facts exactly, but about your own reliability as a witness to your own life. A second, quieter cost is chronic guilt for failing to meet standards that were never actually achievable in the first place, because the goalposts kept moving, or the bar was set specifically to stay just out of reach. People in these dynamics often describe feeling like they're constantly failing at something they can't quite identify. A third cost is the narrowing of behavior over time. To avoid triggering guilt, criticism, or withdrawal, the target starts preemptively shrinking their own needs, opinions, and requests, long before the manipulator even has to ask. The relationship starts running on the target's anticipatory self-editing rather than genuine consent. None of this requires the manipulator to be present in the moment. By this stage, the pattern has been internalized and runs on its own, quietly shaping decisions long after the original relationship that taught it has ended or moved on. The most reliable defense against manipulation isn't suspicion of everyone around you. That approach is exhausting and eventually isolates you from people who genuinely care. It's recognizing the pattern early, in your own body, before you've had time to rationalize it away. Two signals are especially useful. The first is guilt without a clear violation. If you feel guilty but can't actually identify anything you did wrong, that gap between the feeling and the evidence is worth investigating rather than resolving by apologizing. The second is agreement without memory of deciding. If you find yourself having said yes to something and can't reconstruct the moment you actually chose it, that's often a sign the decision was engineered rather than made. Once you notice either signal, naming what you observe out loud to the other person, calmly and without accusation, is often enough to interrupt the pattern entirely. Manipulation depends on the target not noticing the mechanism. Stating plainly what you've observed forces the interaction into the open, where the same tactics tend to lose their power. This doesn't require confrontation or conflict. It requires a level of self-observation that most people were never taught, paired with enough trust in your own perception to act on what you notice, even before you can fully explain why something felt off. The antidote to manipulation is not distrust. It is a clear enough sense of yourself to notice when a conversation is trying to move you somewhere you didn't choose to go. Once you see the pattern up close, it stops feeling like a mystery and starts feeling like something you can work with.